Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar about Hough to Wally's Green. My name is Jonathan, and I'm an engagement executive for HS2. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. As you will understand, we are unable to hold large information events at the moment due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we hope this webinar will help keep you informed about the design refinement consultation and updates for your area, and give you an opportunity to ask general questions which you may have. During the webinar, you will hear from our engagement manager for your area before we move into a question and answer session, where we will be joined by a team of specialists who will answer as many questions as time permits. Please note that we will only be able to answer general questions. Any questions relating to your individual circumstances should be raised via our help desk, who will be able to provide you with the specific advice for your needs. If we get a lot of questions come in around the same topic, we may group these together and answer as one to avoid repeating answers. And if we do run out of time to answer questions and you feel you have not had your question answered, again, we would ask that you contact our help desk. Before I turn over to my colleague John, I want to share some technical information with you. We don't anticipate any technical issues during our event today. However, we want to provide some advice should you experience any connection issues. If your feed freezes, wait for about 10 seconds as it will most likely correct itself. If this doesn't happen, use the leave button to exit the call and rejoin using the event link. You will be able to use the toggle at the bottom of your screen to rewind back to where you left the event. You can also use this functionality at any point during the call, should you need to pause for any reason. If there is a freeze or you disconnect and you are unable to rejoin due to a wider Microsoft incident, we will email you with further information. There is a Q&A and comment function which you should be able to find at the top right of your screen. My colleague Stephen will be keeping an eye on the questions that come through as we go, and then at the end of the session today, he will ask the team here to answer as many of them as we have time to get through. Please note we will only answer general questions. Any questions relating to your individual circumstances should be raised via our help desk. If we get a lot of questions come in around the same topic, we may group these together and answer as one to avoid repeating answers. If you have previously attended one of our local information events or drop-ins, you may be familiar with our next speaker, who will talk you through the purpose of today's session. John, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hi to all on the webinar today. So this presentation covers the community area MA01, which runs approximately 11 kilometres from Hough to Wally's Green in the local authority area of Cheshire East Council. It will cover a proposed refinement to the design in your area that we're consulting on, other changes we've made to our proposals, ground investigations, and what to expect from us in the future. All of the new information can be found on the HS2 website, or you can contact our 24-hour help desk. Details for both will be provided at the end of this presentation by Jonathan. So first, I'll summarise the proposed design refinement that affects MA01, which is the introduction of a Crewe Northern connection and changes to the design of the Crewe North rolling stock depot. So this is actually one of 4 proposed refinements to the design of the new railway that we're consulting on as part of our Western Leg design refinement consultation. And the others, as you can see on the slide, relate to changes at the high-speed stations proposed at Manchester Airport and Piccadilly, and a new train stabling facility at Annandale in Scotland. The consultation will run until the 11th of December 2020, and I'd like to encourage you to let us know what you think about this proposed change. So let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail. It's the Crewe Northern connection, and the Crewe Northern connection would connect the West Coast Main Line to the new high-speed railway north of Crewe, allowing trains to cross between the two. The new junction will help support the delivery of the government's wider strategic vision for a Crewe hub. It will enhance regional connectivity and improve journey times to the north, northwest and Scotland. And the connection will bring several benefits. So the Crewe North connection would allow HS2 services to stop at Crewe and rejoin the HS2 network. And once the Northern Powerhouse rail scheme is complete, Crewe Northern connection will enable future services to leave and rejoin the high-speed network and serve Crewe station. It will allow the opportunity for more services to stop at Crewe, in addition to the 2 trains an hour currently provisioned, and it allows the option of capacity release and journey time improvements by routing London Crewe Liverpool and Birmingham Manchester services via the connection. So the final train service specification will be determined by the government and the train operating company or partnership nearer to the opening date of phase 2B. And on the slide you can see the previously shown design in the area at the top and the proposed refinement, including the new connection, at the bottom. On this slide, you can see the previous, sorry, I beg your pardon, this is a visualization showing the high-speed trains running on the West Coast Main Line, and this is viewed east from the Warmingham footpath 16, close to Moss Farm. The junction and expansion of the rolling stock depot will increase the amount of rail infrastructure in the area, especially immediately north of Crewe, as can be seen on the plan, but it will help deliver the benefits for future services. So for more information about these proposals and the consultation, including how to respond, please visit www.hs2.org.uk/phase 2B. All feedback from the consultation will be considered as part of the Ministry of State's decision whether to include these changes in the design of the route for phase 2B before we deposit the hybrid bill. Next, I'd like to tell you about some of the other changes that we've made to the design in your area. So listening to local community feedback is central to our commitment to be a good neighbour, and it provides an invaluable source of local knowledge as part of the process to refine our design to construct, maintain and operate the railway. We try to incorporate this feedback wherever reasonably possible. And here are some examples of the changes we've made in response to issues and concerns that you have raised with us. We moved the Crewe North Tunnel portal 100 metres further north, away from people's homes, in response to concerns about noise from trains passing too close. This plan shows the new location further to the north. We also looked at whether there was an alternative solution to closing Parkers Road when you told us this could result in severing the local community. While we cannot undertake construction of the scheme without closing Parkers Road to traffic for approximately 2.5 years, we will build a footbridge to allow pedestrians to continue to use this road. You can maybe just make out the temporary accommodation footbridge, accommodation overbridge on the plan on the right-hand side. Also, and after you told us that you were concerned about the congestion that would be caused by construction traffic using Middlewich Street, we revised our plans to also use Sydney Road and reduce the number of HS2 vehicles on Middlewich Street. Our plans also show construction traffic routes we'll be using to move material around in order to build embankments and cuttings. And we understand that construction traffic is a major concern for people, and building this railway will require moving very large amounts of material. So haul roads are temporary routes within the construction boundary to move material from one location to another and help us to keep our vehicles off the existing road network as much as is practically possible. Also, borrow pits are a common temporary feature of major rail and road schemes, and they help to reduce traffic and meet any shortages in the supply of quality earthworks material. So a borrow pit is an area where material can be excavated to be used for construction, and once a borrow pit is no longer required, it's filled in with leftover material and the land is reinstated. So the photos here provide examples of what a borrow pit looks like while in use and after reinstatement. This particular one is work that was required on the A46 M40 at junction 15 near Stratford upon Avon. We do understand that the images of the borrow pit shown may cause some concern. However, that view would only be seen from the air, and we'll be erecting hoardings around the site. An example of a hoarding currently in place around sites on phase 1 of HS2 is shown here. In most places, the use of borrow pits is expected to substantially reduce the number of vehicles on local roads that would otherwise be required to transport materials to and from existing quarries. Borrow pits are not needed in your community area, but there are 4 borrow pits located in the neighbouring community area MAO2. And shown on this slide is an example of a borrow pit as it appears on the construction plans. It's shown in the grey shaded area. This is in MAO2 to the east of the new railway in Wimblesleigh. Just turning to ground investigations now, some of you may know we recently started a round of advanced ground investigation or GI work around Cheshire to better understand the challenging ground conditions in the area. So GI is the examination and study of the soil, the rocks and the groundwater below the surface. And this information helps us to understand the ground conditions along the route to ensure that the new railway is constructed safely and efficiently. And further GI work will be carried out across the whole route later in our programme. The GI work will include non-intrusive investigation using geophysics to help build up a digital picture of what is underground, and intrusive investigations such as drilling and taking samples for testing. You can find more information about anything you've heard from our website, which includes the outcomes of our consultations on the Working Draft Environmental Statement and Working Draft Equality Impact Assessment Report back in 2018, and the first design refinement consultation in 2019. So finally, subject to the outcome of the consultation, the plans shared with you today will be part of our submission of the phase 2 hybrid bill to Parliament, and we expect to submit that in early 2022 or sooner if possible. And this is how the government gains permission to build this nationally important infrastructure. 2024 is when we expect royal assent to be granted, and early enabling works such as utility diversions, compound setups may start soon after that, but the main civil works we would expect to commence in 2026. Phase 2B will be operational between 2035 and 2040, and this will be subject to further work on the study of design and delivery options and the outcomes from the Integrated Rail Programme and National Infrastructure Commission. So that's a brief overview of the work in MEO1. So Stephen, if I could hand over you to have a look at the questions.
Great, thank you very much, John. Move on to questions in a moment, but first I'd like to introduce our panel. We've got Mike from the HS2 Environment team and Nick from the Engineering team, Stephen, who is part of our Traffic and Transport team, and Andy, who is one of our tunnelling leads. And then finally, Steve, who is responsible for our hybrid bill development, so how it will go through Parliament. From the Department for Transport, we've got Paulette from their Policy Division, and Tom, who works on Northern Powerhouse Rail. And then finally, we've got from Transport for the North, who are responsible for developing Northern Powerhouse Rail, we've got Jonathan. So the first question that I'd like to ask, please, is for Nick and Andy, so from our engineering and tunnelling teams. Can you tell us more about how the tunnel will be constructed? How deep will the tunnel be? Where will the material dugout go? And how will you keep houses and properties above the tunnel safe? Nick.
Thank you, Stephen. It's quite a broad question, actually. So I think I'm going to try and answer the first part and then pass it on to Andy to provide some additional technical detail about the tunneling itself. So Crewe Tunnel is proposed to be approximately 6.2 kilometers long with an internal diameter of 8.8 meters. It requires 2 vent shafts, the Cowley Way vent shaft and the Middlewood Street vent shaft. The maximum depth below existing ground surface is expected to be approximately 45 meters, and the minimum depth below ground surface around 19 meters at the northern end of the tunnel. The tunnel is proposed to be constructed using 2 tunnel boring machines driven from the north to the south, and this is reflected in our outline construction phase program that will be published as part of the final environmental statement. So what that means is that we first set up the Crewe Tunnel North main compound, we assemble the TBMs and we start tunneling, and as we move along we start setting up the construction compounds required for the 2 vent shafts, and finally the construction compound required at the southern end of the tunnel. In terms of the tunnel excavated material, we are proposing to use an enclosed conveyor belt from the 2 tunnel boring machines, which will run on the trace of the proposed railway, and the tunnel excavated material will be transported using these conveyor belts from the cutter head all the way to the area of the proposed Crewe North rolling stock depot. The material will be dried and then be used to either backfill the 3 cohesive bore pits that sit adjacent to the east of the trace in the Wimblesley area, with the surplus being moved off-site via rail through the proposed temporary construction sidings. Andy, anything else you would like to add?
Okay, yes, hi, afternoon. So a little bit more on the tunnelling side. There's a potential of 3 different types of TBM that could be used: an earth pressure balance, a variable density, or a slurry. And these chosen dependent on the types of ground conditions that we go through. One of them can do, obviously it's called variable density because it can go through variable types of ground. They're highly controlled. There's operator panel within the TBM that controls every aspect of the tunnelling to very high stringent requirements, and by doing this we can keep a settlement that is affected on surface to very low limits. There's various information papers that are available on the HS2 website that can provide further detail on this. So the tunnel boring machine consists of a shield head, which within that controlled can, if you like, we call it, we will install concrete lining segments, and those are progressively installed as the rams on the back of the shield slowly progress the shield within the ground. And those concrete segments are connected by bolts and dowels, which then create a waterproof tunnel, which again reduces settlement to the ground on the surface.
Great, thank you very much, Andy and Nick, for those answers. For Stephen from our traffic team, there's been no mention of traffic load on Bradfield Road, especially close to Broughton Road and the bridge over from Remus Street to Bradfield Road, that sort of area. Traffic in the area is already very high. What will be done about that, please?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Thank you, Stephen. We do recognise that some of the roads within the Crewe area can be busy at times, and we are expecting traffic patterns to change as a result from the temporary closure of Parkers Road. We have allocated sort of Bradfield Road, North Street, Remus Street as those main diversionary routes, and we will be looking to put HS2 HGVs onto the most suitable roads in the area, and these are shown on our plans as construction routes. Our assessment at the moment is currently being updated to take into account the latest construction, earthworks and operational assumptions, and those results will be contained within the hybrid bill submission. I'm afraid we can't give you, as a result of that, we can't give you the exact answers at this time, but as I said, it will be contained within the hybrid bill submission. Back to you, Stephen.
Great, thank you very much. Question for Mike from our environment team. The Crewe North connection will include high viaducts. What noise mitigation will be done?
Hi, thanks for the question. So in terms of noise mitigation in this area, we've looked at landscape earth bunds, which have the dual purpose of offering a screening element for nearby receptors. In terms of operational noise, we are undertaking a operational noise model at the moment, which will report significant environmental effects. Where we've got effects, we will provide mitigation. Unfortunately, I can't provide any more detail on specific locations, but that will be in the hybrid build deposit. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Mike. And related to that, Nick, how high above the existing ground level will the Northern Connection, the Crewe Northern Connection and the rolling stock depot be?
Thank you, Stephen. I'll start with the easier one. So the proposed Crewe North rolling stock depot will be at approximately existing ground level. That doesn't mean to imply that there will be no site excavated materials. There will be, because we need to improve the existing ground. In terms of Crewe Northern Connection, and more specifically in terms of the two viaducts proposed to be a part of Crewe Northern Connection, one of the viaducts is expected to be up to 13 meters above existing ground level, and the other one to the east is expected to be up to 11 meters above existing ground level. It's also worth noting that the main line we've aimed to follow apologies, the existing ground level as far as reasonably practicable, and that has resulted in a mainline elevation being between 1 and 3 meters throughout this area. Back to you, Stephen.
Fine. Thank you very much, Nick, for that. Mike, when will the final environmental statement be available, please?
So we anticipate that hybrid build deposit, which will include the final environmental statement, will be in early 2022 or potentially earlier, but that is subject to refinement with our stakeholders. But yes, we anticipate 2022.
Thank you. And another question also for you, Mike. Will there be any tree planting by the Crewe Northern Connection prior to operation?
So in terms of our landscape mitigation strategy, this combines strategic landscape planting, some of which will be done early in the construction phase where possible, and also areas of ecological planting, which provide that biodiversity function. So there will be a mixture of some early planting prior to operation, which will have had time to mature for operation. In some of our visualizations as part of the consultation, you can see the level of maturity in that planting, and it does provide some screening for the structures.
Mike. Question for Nick, but I guess others might want to chip in as well. Can you provide further detail on your proposed changes at the Warmingham Moss area, which was briefly mentioned in the presentation?
Thank you, Stephen. So in that area, the main change compared to the working draft environmental statement is the introduction of proposal of including a Crewe Northern Connection. So Crewe Northern Connection forms the final strategic part of the Crewe Hub scheme. So we have a connection between the West Coast Main Line and the HS2 Main Line south of Crewe to be provided by Phase 2A. Then Network Rail will undertake some enhancements at the central area and around the Crewe station. And finally, HS2 Phase 2B are proposing a junction between the West Coast Main Line and the HS2 Main Line north of Crewe. Now, the way we are providing this junction, and the main reason why this junction is grade separated, is due to the nature of the services that HS2 will be providing. As I believe all attendees may be aware, HS2 will only provide passenger services. Therefore, the presentation of the West Coast Main Line tracks north of Crewe, which see all the passenger lines, well, the majority of the passenger services being run on the two central tracks of the 4-track corridor, basically make us having to connect to the two central tracks of the West Coast Main Line. In order to achieve that, we have to create safe working space, not just for construction, but also for the maintenance. In summary, and as simply as I can put it, we're slewing the two outer lines of the 4-track West Coast Main Line, and we're providing two viaducts connecting the two central tracks of the West Coast Main Line to the HS2 Main Line. People tend to think that Crewe North connection is basically these two structures, but that's far from true. Actually, Crewe Northern connection runs for approximately 10 kilometers, and everything converges back to the standard 2-track railway corridor for HS2, just south of the proposed River Dane viaduct in community area MAO2. And the main reason for that is the different design speeds. So the West Coast Main Line has a design speed of up to 200 kph, and we have to either get trains to accelerate or decelerate before they can leave or join the HS2 Main Line. So I hope that helps. I do appreciate it's quite complicated, but that's the only reasonable solution to connect the two railways in this area. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Nick. Question for Mike, please, around Wimbledon Primary School and the effect of construction and congestion in that area. Why has the adverse effect of construction during the construction period on the primary school been completely ignored?
So in our consultation document for this consultation, we do reference the impact on Wimblesey School, and we do believe that the change in size of the depot will not lead to greater impacts on the school. This is primarily because the increase in the depot from 60 hectares to 65 is all to the north of the existing depot footprint, whereas the school lies to the east of the HS2 main line. Now, we have been talking to Cheshire West and Chester Council about the impacts on the school and would welcome further dialogue with the school on that, but we are working hard on the mitigation, and we do anticipate that the school will not require relocation as a result of those impacts.
Thanks, Mike. Nick, I think quite a simple question for you. Can you just clarify the rolling stock depot and associated works will be no higher than the existing ground level?
Thank you, Stephen. As I said earlier, the main line, the HS2 main line, is approximately at ground level in this area north of Crewe and up to the proposed Crewe North rolling stock depot. To get trains safely in, we have to maintain minimum gradients, basically, and that in turn means that the proposed levels of the Crewe North rolling stock depot will be very, very similar to those of the main line and very close to the existing ground levels. I hope that clarifies it.
Great, thank you very much. A couple of questions for Mike, which I think are probably linked. One of which is will there be tree planting at the Hoff end of the tunnel? And then related to that, when will the landscape and bund proposals be available to view? Are they part of the environmental statement?
Hi, yeah. So first question, at the Hough end of the tunnel, yes, there is landscape mitigation, planting and earthworks as part of the phase 2B proposals. This is also our interface with phase 2A. So the mitigation strategy will be a joint endeavour to obviously integrate the tunnel portal into that landscape. In terms of the existing landscape proposals, yes, they are available on our website on the HS2 in your area map book section. If we can provide a link to those in the chat, hopefully you can all access those and see our proposals.
Thank you very much, Mike. We'll see what we can do to get that in the chat. Andy, question for you from somebody who lives near the railway track and is concerned about the noise. We live next to the track by Bradfield Road Bridge. What are the plans for working on the tunnel, for example, through the night? concerned around noise and voices from workers, as we previously had issues with Network Rail in the middle of the night. We know work needs to happen for safety reasons, but don't want engineers shouting at each other. Can you help us on that, Andy?
Yep. Hi. So yes, when we obviously launch the TBMs, there's obviously a lot learning curve on that. So sometimes that will tend to be starting off at daytime, but then once we get going, the tunneling goes 24 hours, but obviously all the work is happening at the face of that TBM, so it's all within the tunnel. So there wouldn't be a great need for any of the workforce to be in those locations, and obviously there'd be tight working to various requirements for those reasons, that there's neighbours. A lot of the tunnelling projects in London, obviously they work very close to, much closer to neighbours. So obviously there's full understanding of the impacts that would have. So noise is minimised and mitigations are put in place as required. So any plant that needs any sound mitigation.
Okay, thank you very much. Question for Mike, please, around acoustic fencing. Will properties next to the track be provided with acoustic fencing to reduce the noise from the extra rail traffic noise? Also, it would be useful if the fencing on Bradfield Road Bridge could have acoustic fencing due to the heavy HGVs currently using this road now, coupled with Parkers Road closing for a period. Is that a question that you can help us with, Mike?
Sure. So yes, our proposals in strategic locations do include noise fences or barriers. These are shown as purple lines alongside the train alignment on our maps. So hopefully the link that we've shared, you can see those. They will be in locations where we deem that, you know, that the noise effects are worthy of mitigation. As I say, the work is ongoing to refine those locations, and the final proposals will be presented in the bill. So that's the information we have at this point, but that will be subject to further modelling and assessment.
Thank you very much, Mike. Question for Andy from the tunnelling team. Will the conveyors generate noise? What hours will they be operating?
So yes, as Michael said earlier, the operational noise effects will be worked on and then mitigated as required. So obviously can't give the details right now, but yes, the conveyors will be working 24 hours on the assumption that the assumption at the minute is the TBM will be an earth pressure balance TBM, which would need a conveyor, but there is a chance that if it went to a variable density TBM or a slurry machine, then there wouldn't be conveyors. It would be, the material would be extracted using a slurry pipe, which therefore wouldn't actually be a conveyor.
Okay, Mike, do you want to add anything to that from an environmental perspective, or are you happy with that as an answer?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of core construction hours, they are 8 AM till 6 PM on weekdays and 8 to 1 PM on Saturdays. Where we have to do some elements of nighttime working, that would have to be agreed with the local authority. In terms of conveyors generating noise, our code of construction practice will encompass mitigation measures which will reduce the element of noise that those conveyor operations will create. So more detail can be found on that on our website.
Great, thank you, Mike. Question for Nick. What will be the width of the proposed viaduct from the existing West Coast Main Line?
Thank you, Stephen. With regards to the twin track viaduct, so the viaduct that is the highest of the two structures, and it is to the west, it starts to the west of the West Coast Main Line. This is expected to be at around 13 meters in total width, including the parapets. Back to you.
Very much. Question, I think probably for a bit of Stephen from Traffic and Transport and a bit of Nick from an engineering perspective. The A530 by the Verdin Arms is an accident black spot. Putting a high bridge over the two tracks will give considerable construction noise. What height will the bridge be? And post-construction, what is being done to make the road safe? So if Nick, you can talk about the new structure, and then Stephen follow up with the safety.
Thank you, Stephen. The proposed new viaduct for the realigned A530 is expected to be up to 13 meters above existing ground level at its maximum height. With regards to the safety concerns, we have undertaken a stage 1 road safety audit this was undertaken by an independent audit team, and no issues were actually identified. As part of our design, we are also looking at any historic crash maps. So we've investigated the main causes for accidents on every road we are proposing to realign, and we are quite comfortable with what we're currently proposing. That said, the design will have to be discussed with the local authority and eventually obtain their endorsement. Stephen, is there anything you would like to add?
Thanks, Nick. No, I think you've covered most of it there. I think it's important to note that the queries about what was being done post-construction to make the road safe. As Nick's mentioned already, we do take road realignment, road reconstruction very seriously, and we actually start looking into these things now rather than post-construction. So as well as undertaking safety audits on the proposals, we do design these new roads and bridges to the latest highway standards in consultation with the local authority, and therefore we believe that the final bridge solution will be a safe one from a highways point of view. Back to you, Stephen.
Thanks very much. A question for Mike. We discussed earlier the effect on Wimblesley Primary School of the Crewe Northern Connection, and the member of the public who asked that has got back to us saying that it's the effect around the construction period that's the source of concern. Is there anything you can add to your previous answer given that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we acknowledge that the construction phase will have an impact in this area. As I've said, the Code of Construction Practice is our guiding principle here, and our contractors will be legally obliged to adhere to the principles within it, and that includes measures such as, you know, sensitive hoardings, sensitive layout of construction sites. We'll also be having the site haul routes, which will mean the impact on the local roads will be significantly reduced for receptors such as the school. I believe there was also some further questions about mitigation and the conveyor, so I'll expand on those. So in terms of the conveyor from the tunnel portal to the depot site, that will also be a covered structure, which will limit the impact of dust and noise on nearby receptors. And when I say mitigation is a sort of environmental assessment scientific term for essentially reducing the effects. So where we have a significant environmental effect, we are legally obliged to mitigate that effect, which encompasses measures like noise barriers, planting, Code of Construction Practice. I hope that answers your questions. If not, I'm happy to expand further.
Thanks very much, Mike. Question for John Atkinson, the engagement manager for the area. What will be the engagement, the consultation with local people during the construction phase?
Okay, thank you, Stephen, and thanks for the call out. Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? I think, and I think HS2 take the view that you know we will retain our relationship with the local community, and as well as having a very strong opinion and direction on the contractor as well. So we will engage a contractor who has impressed us with their ability to demonstrate how they are going to interact with the local community, because we see that as absolutely critical, because they will be within the community for many years in some cases. So that will be a key factor in determining who will do the work for us and how they manage that. But HS2 is still going to be around as the client, and we would expect probably people like myself would see ourselves in the role of the guardian of the community's interests, as it were. We'll be watching carefully what the contractors are doing, and we will be a source that's available to people if they feel they want to sort of come to us for, as it were, further help or complaint, if you will. But yeah, one of our key pillars of HS2 in the whole organisation is that we be a good neighbour, and that can be quite difficult with a construction scheme as big as this, but it's something we're determined to see carried out. And the stakeholder engagement will not disappear with the approval of the bill. It will, if anything, it will increase, and I certainly hope that will be the case. But, Stephen, back to you.
Thanks very much, John. Nick, what will happen to the high voltage overhead cables crossing the site of the CNC, the Crewe Northern Connection?
Thank you, Stephen. I believe we're referring to the area between Spring Farm and Moss Farm, so north of Crewe, at the height of where the Crewe Northern Connection viaducts are at their maximum height. Both assets are proposed to be diverted. We're talking about two different assets, both owned by Scottish Power. The southernmost one is a 132 kV cable, and the other one is an extra high voltage cable. Both of them, the southernmost one, south of Spring Farm and Moss Farm, is proposed to be undergrounded to cross the proposed scheme and the West Coast Main Line, whereas the other one is expected to be diverted on new pylons over the proposed scheme and the existing West Coast Main Line. To you, Stephen.
Thanks, Nick. Question for Stephen from our Traffic and Transport team, and it's about Bradfield Road. We talked earlier about the accident hotspot in the Vernon area, and a member of the public is just expressing the concern or the hope that our searches include the Bradfield Road area, as it's close to the bridge as an accident black spot.
Thank you for your question about accidents and accident black spots. Yes, we do across the entire HS2 route, where we think we may have an impact or change traffic flows on any of the roads in and around the scheme. We do look at the accident record over a period of several years, in the past, say, 3 to 4 years. This is information collated by the government from police records, which notes severity of accidents and how those accidents took place. So we can look at those accidents with a view to what we do in terms of mitigation, if that's required, if we think that's required in that area. So yes, rest assured, we do look at accidents, and if there are groups of accidents within our assessment, and you can see the methodology of that in our reporting when that comes out at submission time. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. A question for Nick. Obviously, this is the area that is closest to Phase 2A. So how does the Northern Connection fit in with the Phase 2A Crewe tunnelling? Is there a conflict, or can both be built at the same time?
Thank you, Stephen. It's a very complicated area, let's say that. So Crewe Northern Connection is a standalone item. Yes, there are interfaces with the main works to do the tunnels, but they can be considered independent. In terms of the interface with Phase 2A and Crewe Tunnel, because we're tunneling from north to south, it is expected that there would be no actual interface between the two proposed schemes. That said, Phase 2B is proposing to use an area that has already been identified by Phase 2A as a construction compound for the extraction and disassembly of the TBMs. Therefore, because we expect to finish the tunnel in, well, around 2030, Phase 2A will be long gone by then. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Nick. Question for John, the engagement team. Will the Crewe Northern connection strengthen the case for need to sell?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephen, and to the questioner. I suppose possibly is the answer. Need to sell is a scheme that has, I think, 5 criteria to fulfil, and one of those is that your need to sell is in some way thwarted or obstructed by proximity to the scheme, and to the extent that a member of the public may now become nearer to this major piece of infrastructure, that could become a factor in the need to sell application. But it depends where you live largely. You have to demonstrate that this is having an effect on your ability to sell, and yeah, you may well be able to do that. I wouldn't contest that, but it's for the applicant to demonstrate that the reason they can't sell is because of HS2, and clearly we're adding a new piece of infrastructure there that may provide evidence for that cause, as it were. Okay.
Thank you very much, John. Question on how these proposals benefit Northern Powerhouse Rail, which I'll ask of first Jonathan from Transport for the North, and then also Tom from the Department for Transport. And that's basically it, really. How do the proposals that we published last month contribute to TFN's Northern Powerhouse Rail proposals? What does it enable us to do that couldn't be done without them? Jonathan.
Thank you, Stephen. Northern Powerhouse Rail is a major programme of the government and Transport for the North to improve connectivity across the north of England. Crewe Northern Connection is important to Northern Powerhouse Rail because it would allow Northern Powerhouse Rail to serve Crewe and to link it with Manchester Airport and Manchester itself, and indeed destinations east of Manchester towards Leeds and Sheffield, potentially subject to commercial considerations. It also allows Liverpool to London trains to operate using HS2, using infrastructure that was consulted in the design refinement phase 1 activity last year. So Crewe is an important centre. Obviously, the plans of Cheshire East Council and others to significantly develop the station and the area around it would also be given added impetus by Crewe North Connection. So it's an important piece of infrastructure for Northern Powerhouse Rail and for the North Sea money. Thank you.
Tom, is there anything you'd like to add to Jonathan's answer from the Department for Transport perspective?
Thank you very much. Jonathan's explained it really well there. So there's not much that I can add to that, other than just to say that for the Department for Transport schemes, we can make fund have a good business case, and one way to achieve that is to make as sort of thorough use of the infrastructure we build as possible, and the synergy that Crewe North Connection allows between High Speed 2 and the Northern Powerhouse Rail proposals that Jonathan's described, allowing trains to travel from one onto the other, is one of the sort of contributors, I suppose, to helping to build a good business case for these proposals.
Great, thank you very much, Jonathan and Tom. Nick, has the grade been agreed at the Hough end of the tunnel?
Thank you, Stephen. It's a very good question, actually, because although Phase 2B will be delivered in 2 packages, we have Phase 2A and Phase 2B, the design of the interface is fully coordinated. There is an interface control document where all the interfaces are captured and risks are raised alongside mitigations. So the answer is yes, our alignment ties into the proposed Phase 2A alignment as in AP2. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Question for Steve McFarland from our hybrid build team. Why does it take quite as long to go through Parliament and to get going on actually building this proposal, the proposal we're talking about today? Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. I mean, it does take a considerable period of time to get through the parliamentary process. I think it's important to remember that we are talking about probably the biggest infrastructure project in Western Europe, and it's important that it gets scrutiny from Parliament, both in terms of the changes we need to make to the law to operate the railway, but also that those people who are affected by the scheme are able to have their concerns heard by Parliament and addressed through the select committee process. So whilst it is a sort of a longer period of time for consideration that might be the case for, say, a standard planning inquiry, it's an effective process for the delivery of major infrastructure of the scale that we're talking about for HS2. Great.
Thank you very much, Steve. Can I remind people we're coming to the end of this webinar, so if you've got any questions, any further questions, and we've had some fantastic questions today, but if you've got any further questions, can you please get them in the next couple of minutes? Thank you. Question for Nick. What is the Warmingham Moss telecommunications site?
Thank you, Stephen. In order to operate a safe railway, we need telecommunications. So we need trains to talk to the control room and with each other. To achieve that, we have to install some telecommunications compounds every 2.5 to 3 kilometers. Mainly, in summary, these compounds consist of a mast, a telecommunications mast, and an associated cabin, which provides the electricity for the system. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Another question for you. What speed will trains be travelling at coming out of Crewe Tunnel northbound if they are through trains rather than having stopped at Crewe?
As for the entirety of the HS2 main line, trains will be running up to 360 kilometers an hour. In terms of normal operations through the tunnel, we can expect the speeds to be approximately 5% lower than that, whilst retaining the ability to run at 360 for catch-up services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question for Paulette from the Department for Transport. How will the proposals that we're talking about today, that we've published and so on, how will they affect Crewe Station? Is that something you can help us with?
Yeah, happy to answer that for you. Thanks, Steve. The phase 2 construction works will not directly have an impact on the Crewe station itself. However, during the construction period, we do expect there may be some disruption to services north of Crewe. This will be reduced by a combination of diversions, replacement bus services, and also by looking to maximise the use of available maintenance windows for this part of the West Coast Main Line. This may include mitigations like night working on weekdays, extending night working on Saturdays, and extending blockades during the holiday periods. So that's the process in terms of addressing those concerns. The current design attempts to maximise the offline construction, so this will reduce the amount of required possessions. HS2 will also continue to work with Network Rail to ensure the proposed designs are aligned and represent value for money and contribute towards the integrated new railway. I hope that answers your question, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Paulette. Stephen from Traffic and Transport, how will Parker's Road be affected through these proposals?
Hi, thank you for your question. Parker's Road, I think we've previously discussed this, will need to be closed for a couple of years to enable the construction of the railway and the tunnel portal. During that time, we will actually provide a replacement footbridge over there for connectivity. However, traffic diversions will need to take place, and those will be directed mainly via Bradfield Road, North Street and Bremer Street. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much, Stephen. And the final question for today, thank you very much, panel, for your help so far, is around the PORES portal. Can you explain to us how the PORES portal will be constructed and how it how it helps local people. That's a question I think for Andy in the first instance, in terms of how PORES portals work in principle, and then Nick might want to add something in terms of the impact or the help that it offers to those immediately next to this particular PORES portal. Is that okay, Andy?
Hi, yes. So first of all, if we talk about the speed of the train going through a tunnel will create almost like a piston sort of effect, i.e. pushing the air that's in ahead of it through at high speed, which then creates a micro pressure wave. And back at the exit part of the tunnel, without a PORES portal, there would be almost like what you'd hear a sonic boom sort of thing. So we provide PORES portals to mitigate that. Basically, it's a structure with various size holes in it that allows that pressure of air to dissipate equally and controlled in a controlled manner, so that there's no noise to the local community in that area. These have been widely used across the world over the last 20 odd years, and we've learned a lot internationally from these PORES portals, and we've further developed it to a point now that we've got international consultants and contractors using the work that we've developed for these.
Great, Andy, thank you very much. Nick, have you got anything to add?
I don't think so. Andy explained it so well. In essence, we need to keep in mind that we're building actually a retained cutting and then building a concrete structure with perforations to allow for the dissipation of micropressure waves. Level summary of what the PORES portal does.
Great. Thank you both very much for those answers. Thank you very much, everyone, for answering all of those. We've answered over 25 questions from members of the public, and I hope you listening in have found it useful. Jonathan.
Again, can I thank all participants for their questions and panel members for their detailed answers. And I hope that you found today's webinar useful. All of the information mentioned today can be found on the HS2 website, which is www.hs2.org.uk/phase 2B. If you have any questions or need help accessing the information, please contact our help desk on 08081 434 434 or by Minicom on 08081 456 472 or by email hs2inquiries@hs2.org.uk. Thank you again for your attendance at today's webinar, and I hope you have a good day.